busy show today. TV news legend Michael Crick slams the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, questions his judgment and says that Labour corruption stinks to high heaven. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are attacked for their LA wildfires photo op, and is America already feeling the Donald Trump effect? Lots to get through. Fantastic to have you with me as always. And we start with my hot take. Good to see you. I hope you are very well. Now, the last few years of government authoritarianism and tyranny have taught us one important thing. Whether it's locking us in our homes in a failed bid to stop a largely mild seasonal virus, making us say that men are women now, being forced to take a medication that most people statistically don't need, or printing money apparently without consequence. If something doesn't make sense, it's because, well, it doesn't make sense. Which takes me to net zero. Now, I'm all for cleaning up the environment. It is quite clear, whatever your politics, that we are wrecking the planet. We're pumping fumes into the atmosphere. Industry is polluting the air, our food supply and our water. There's now more plastic in the ocean than in Sharon Osbourne's face. I've all but given up eating tuna, one of my favourite foods. Such is the volume of mercury that can be found in it. Plastic waste is off the charts, with so many products in needless packaging, including supermarket food items that when I was a kid were accommodated in a brown paper bag. Look at the toys that kids get given that are played with for a couple of years and thrown away. And whilst I'm a huge fan of cheap clothing retailers like Primark, who make fashion accessible to all of us, to go into one of their stores and look at a sea of polyester is somewhat depressing. The clothing industry alone is absolutely terrible for the environment, with toxic dyes leaking into local rivers, with single-use clothing items, sometimes just bought for a party, chucked into the ground. Absolutely horrible, damaging our national landscape. And don't get me started on those face coverings and plastic testing kits. There is a mountain of that rubbish the size of the Himalayas festering in the sea, entering the fish and therefore ultimately us. I go around on a little moped, a 125 motorcycle. I'll be honest, I look ridiculous on it because I'm far bigger than it is. And I sometimes have to hold my breath when going past certain vehicles, so noxious are the diesel fumes. And how can our tap water be completely clean and safe, as the authorities tell us, given where it's come from? I think the best you can say is it won't kill you, which is not exactly a ringing endorsement, is it? So I'd be happy to make lifestyle changes to benefit the planet. It is our duty and responsibility to hand the earth over to the next generation in a better state than we found it. Currently, we're making it worse. But a concern for the environment, which was shared by most people before it became so political, is not the same as the ideology of net zero. Now, I call it an ideology because it is rooted in an unshakable belief system that somehow we have to adopt a sort of green communism 2.0 to stop the planet blowing up by next Tuesday. At best, net zero is a political project. At worst, a chilling authoritarian cult. Proof of that is it cannot be criticised. And if you question some of the numbers involved, the projections, the so-called science, you are a bad person and a non-believer. Except that if you can't debate it, or question it, or be sceptical, or look at the numbers, then it isn't science at all. Because science is a conversation, it's an argument, it is the competition of ideas, and it is evidence-based. And when it comes to our forthcoming Armageddon, due shortly apparently, that evidence base is just not there. Now, clearly the planet's temperature is rising. But the net zero movement do themselves no favours by changing TV weather maps to make them dark red in order to create a climate of fear around the climate. You could sense their disappointment, couldn't you, last summer when temperatures in Greece, Spain, and Italy, for example, were on par with previous years. But it didn't stop them doing weather forecasts with maps that were so crimson they were virtually on fire. The same weather forecasts 20 years ago, featuring the same temperatures, were simply illustrated by an image of the sun shining. But of course now there is a message to convey, or, if we're honest, an ideology to sell. It's brainwashing and it's propaganda. But here's the thing. Even if we are facing a climate catastrophe, and frankly, my mind is open on that one, net zero clearly isn't the way to tackle it. First of all, it's not clear that it will make a blind bit of difference. How can a country like the UK, with global carbon emissions of 1%, not bad for the sixth biggest economy in the world, how can they possibly justify bankrupting the UK whilst China, India and Brazil burn fossil fuels for fun? How can we do net zero if China are not? After all, if it doesn't make sense, it's because it doesn't make sense. Which is why we need to talk about it. And I'll be using my freedom on the Mark Dolan show without the gatekeepers of mainstream broadcasting pushing the net zero agenda. And here's the thing. Maybe it is the right policy. But let's talk about it, shall we? Debate it and look at the data. For example, how can electric cars be good for the environment when their batteries are derived from precious, finite resources and collected under slave labour conditions in countries like the Congo by 12-year-old children knee-deep in fetid water and mud so that middle-class people can cruise around central London and Los Angeles in an EV? These electric cars are useless for longer journeys. The charging stations are fueled by fossil fuels, and the shelf life of an electric car is a fraction of that of a normal car, given that after a few years, a failing battery makes it almost worthless, hence the dire state of the second-hand electric car market. These cars are horribly full of toxic rubbish, really bad for the environment. And what about the energy inputs to make these cars? Why can't you keep your 11-year-old Volkswagen Passat, which doesn't really require any inputs to create because it's already there? But oh no, you've got to ditch a perfectly reliable working car, buy a new one, and you've saved the planet. It goes without saying that these policies impact those on the lowest incomes the most. Net zero is a bourgeois middle-class vanity project. Net zero is not just an economic threat, by the way, given that it bets the house on flaky renewables, but it is a national security threat too. Because if we ignore the vast natural resources at our disposal, such as oil and gas, of which there is decades worth in the North Sea, we will be reliant on despotic regimes like Saudi Arabia and potentially a post-Putin Russia just to keep the lights on. Wind turbines require a colossal amount of energy and resource to build, including concrete, which, surprise, surprise, is terrible for the environment. They need a vast amount of oil to keep those massive unrecyclable blades spinning. And they need to be replaced wholesale after about 15 to 20 years. I'd love to see a cost-benefit analysis of whether these countryside-wrecking eyesores are of any use at all. Of course, I'm not closed-minded about this. Green renewables have potential. Britain leads the world in green tech. It can be a source of jobs and economic growth, plus innovation. If there is energy in the wind, in the sun, and in the waves, then let's tap into it. And at the moment, we do. But the technology is in its infancy. So for now, it needs to be a mix of nuclear, fossil fuels, and green renewables. Unfortunately, we're not going to have common sense. Instead, our new government, under the maniacal leadership of Energy Secretary Ed Miliband, has signed up to this suicidal act of economic disarmament. Well, let's see how that's going to work out for him, shall we? Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Man United co-owner and boss of chemical giant Ineos, has warned that Britain's multi-billion-pound chemicals industry is facing, and I quote, extinction because of soaring energy costs and the shift to net zero. INEOS last week shut down a synthetic ethanol centre at Grangemouth in Falkirk, Scotland, resulting in the loss of up to 600 jobs. Sir Jim, one of Britain's richest men, said deindustrialising Britain achieves nothing for the environment, it merely shifts production and emissions elsewhere. Elsewhere being China, for example, a dangerous despotic regime which is seeking to become the number one economic and military superpower on the planet. And we are helping them. It's a great myth that Britain doesn't make things anymore. In fact, we recently bypassed France to become number 8 in the world for manufacturing. But that's not going to continue for much longer if we continue to sacrifice our energy supply. If you want a warning from overseas about what net zero ideology can do, just look at the fall of Germany, a once great industrial powerhouse, but now a shadow of its former self. The German economy has shrunk for the second year in a row, with Germany now being characterised as the sick man of Europe. Very bad news for the continent and for the EU, who rely on Germany's wealth and largesse to prop up other failing EU nations. Germany have spent tens of billions of pounds on green renewables, and all it has done is make it harder for industrial giants like Bosch, Siemens and Mercedes-Benz to manufacture their products. And it was the insane decision of Angela Merkel in 2011, egged on by the German Greens, to cancel their nuclear projects. Donald Trump warned them in 2016 that they were too reliant on cheap Russian oil and gas, but they just laughed. But since Putin's invasion of Ukraine, having to buy energy from elsewhere has crippled the German economy. Because here's the thing, if you are an industrial nation and energy costs are high, then it's game over. It is that simple. We are now taking the same path. If it doesn't make sense, it's because it doesn't make sense. I'm all for cleaning up the planet, but the religion of net zero is just a lot of hot air. A quick interruption to thank you for coming over to YouTube to watch The Mark Dolan Show. But here's an opportunity to see all of my shows longer, unedited, with no ads, all for free at markdolan.com, along with lots of extra content, including bonus interviews and exclusive monologues, plus personal videos from me at home, live chats, and the chance for you to message me directly. Longer show, bonus videos, all ad-free. Just go to markdolan.com and I'll see you there. Now, a fresh headache for Sir Keir Starmer as Treasury Minister Tulip Siddiq steps down due to her close ties to her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, the ousted Prime Minister of Bangladesh, who now faces serious corruption charges. Siddiq, who was the City and Anti-Corruption Minister, oh, the irony, stepped aside after an investigation by the Advisor on Ministerial Standards into her use of properties given to herself and family by allies of the regime of her aunt. Now, she was not deemed to have broken any parliamentary rules over her use of the homes. So what is the problem and why has she gone? Let's get the views of one of the finest broadcast journalists in the country, TV news legend, Michael Crick. Michael, if she's done nothing wrong, why has she gone?
Well, I mean, the official line is it's the perception of a conflict of interest and all of that, the perception. And of course, the inquiry carried out by this guy, Sir Laurie Magnus, the government standards advisor, it only lasted 8 days and he couldn't really get to the bottom of things. There's all sorts of mystery surrounding various flats that Tulip Siddiq has lived in London, and where they came from, and were they given to her, and who gave them, and this against the backdrop of a new regime in Bangladesh. Her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, was overthrown last summer, and the new regime are doing lots of work on investigations into corruption and the extent of the corruption. And the big question mark is, was Tulip Siddiq a beneficiary of a very corrupt and authoritarian and frankly murderous at times regime run by her aunt. And so what Sir Laurie Magnus has looked at is only a tiny bit of this. And it seems to me that the Tulip Sadiq is one of, I have about 20 MPs in my head, and I've actually written them down somewhere, who I regard as accidents waiting to happen. And she's been an accident waiting to happen for years and years and years. So, okay, Laurie Magnus didn't get very far in his inquiries, and it's possible that new information will, likely in fact, that new information will come to light that would have made Tulip Sadiq's position as a Treasury Minister, and in particularly the anti-corruption minister, as you say, what an irony. It would have made her position more difficult. My view is that she is not fit to be a member of Parliament, and that view stems not from this question of corruption in Bangladesh and whatever the new regime might find out, and how thorough and how credible is whatever the new regime says. I don't know, but simply the way that she has operated in British politics for the last 15 years, where essentially she has been an agent of the Awami League, which is the party that was run by her aunt in Bangladesh and many members of her family. And Tulip Sadiq's an extraordinary character in British politics, because it's a bit like having a member of the Kennedy family as a member of Parliament. And, John F. Kennedy's nephew or niece as a member of Parliament, because Tulip Sadiq, for a start, the family are, they are the big Bangladesh family. Her, and the family that brought about independence in the early 70s. And her aunt has been Prime Minister of Bangladesh for two spells, totaling 20 years. She's the longest serving Bangladeshi Prime Minister. And when she was first elected to Parliament, Tulip Sadiq said at a meeting, at least one meeting in Hampstead, where her constituency, and another meeting in Bangladesh, she said that she owed her election as a Member of Parliament to the Awami League, that she was said this to supporters of the Awami League. Now, most members of Parliament would say they owe their election to their constituents or their local parties. But there she was, attributing her election as a British Member of Parliament to a foreign political party, thousands and thousands of miles away. And we know from work done by various journalists, and I would draw your viewers' attention to films made by Alex Thompson for Channel 4 News in 2017, we know that before she was elected Member of Parliament in 2015, Tulip Sadiq was operating as the spokeswoman, or whatever you want to call her, of the Awami League, made it perfectly clear that that's what she was. She said it on her website, and she was acting really as their spokesperson, their agent in London. An extraordinary position. And what is extraordinary is that the Labour Party selected her in those circumstances, not just when she was the agent of a foreign government, a foreign power, a foreign political party, but when that party already had such an appalling reputation in terms of human rights. And this is an appalling use of English language, but people talk about how the Awami League government would disappear people. In other words, their critics would suddenly vanish, and nobody knew where they were for years and years and years. Some of those people who vanished and disappeared, a few dozen of them, turned up dead. I mean, it's a pretty appalling regime that her.
And am I right in thinking, Michael? Sorry to interrupt you. Michael. Yeah. Michael, am I right in thinking that the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, knew about these links as far back as 2017?
Oh, at least in 2017, because one of his constituents in the neighbouring constituency of Holborn and St Pancras, again, part of Camden Borough, like Tulip Sadiq's constituency, wrote to him and said he thought it was appalling what Channel 4 News had been saying about her, and that Starmer should do something about it. that Tulip Sadiq was not fit to be a member of Parliament. Now, got to remember, at that stage, Starmer was not the leader of the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn was, but Starmer was a member of the shadow cabinet and a leading figure. And this constituent drew attention, as indeed did Channel 4 News, to the particular case of a barrister, a lawyer called. Sorry, I always get his name wrong. Ahmed bin Qassem. Ahmed bin Qassem, right, who had been abducted in 2016 and disappeared, and his family didn't know where he was, and indeed he didn't reappear until last summer. So he disappeared in the end for 8 years, and Channel 4 News had put it to Tulip Sadiq. Well, why aren't you? Investigate. Shouldn't you be investigating this man's disappearance? A British trained barrister. He studied at the University of London. He was a member of the British Bar, a British barrister, and there he disappears in Bangladesh. And the most influential Bangladeshi in this country, in terms of influencing the then Bangladeshi government, was, of course, Tulip Sadiq. And Tulip Sadiq refused to have anything to do with this man's case, because she said, he's not one of my constituents. Well, that's true. He wasn't one of her constituents, but that doesn't stop members of Parliament taking up human rights cases. And so Starmer this constituent of Starmer wrote to him about the Channel 4 News films and about the case of Ahmed bin Qassem. And Starmer actually wrote back, that this was an exchange of emails, wrote back and said, that this was not the first constituent to bring his attention to the case of Ahmed bin Qassem. Now, Starmer, you may recall, was a human rights lawyer. And you would have thought that alarm bells would ring all over his brain, thinking, crikey, what's Tulip Sadiq been up to? What's she doing going around defending an appalling regime like Bangladesh, even though it is her aunt in charge? Do we really want her? Do I really want her as a colleague in the House of Commons? And then those bells should have rung again last summer when he was forming his government. And he should have been asking, do I want her to be a government minister? And in particular, do I want her to be the government minister who is in charge of corruption? I mean, the whole case stinks to high heaven. And it's important. It's much more. I mean, the case of Tulip Sadiq, with a bit of luck, she is out of the, she's out of the picture in terms of government. I don't think she should remain an MP, but that may happen, that she's forced out as an MP. But it does raise huge question marks about Keir Starmer's judgment. What was he doing appointing her a government minister? And why didn't he do more to get to the bottom of what Tulip Sadiq had been doing on behalf of her aunt's party, the Awami League? And that was well before any of these questions that arise about whether she is the beneficiary of corruption in Bangladesh and where these flats and houses came from in London that she and her family have been living in. I mean, this is an extraordinary story. I think the problem from Starmer's point of view is that the Awami League and supporters of the Awami League are quite influential in the London Labour Party and in the Labour Party nationwide, and particularly in the Camden Borough. And there are quite a few councillors there with links. Now, they'll all be distancing themselves now from the Awami League, now that the Awami League has fallen from power and is, increasingly be shown to be tyrannical and corrupt and murderous. Really, let's be plain about it. But it's interesting because it's another example of where Labour's links with certain parts of the Asian community is causing it problems. And we've seen that, of course, in the whole question of the grooming gangs as well in other parts of the country. And I think this is going to be a recurring theme of Labour politics. Labour over the years has become more and more dependent on the Asian voters, Asian activists who, many of whom have been highly successful in running businesses in this country and generous in their donations to the party. But the worry is, I think, and I'm sure there are people in the Asian community who share these worries, is that have some of the methods and values of Asian politics in Pakistan and maybe in Bangladesh, and of society also being brought into our politics and our country. I mean, I think over time, as groups assimilate and so on, some of these problems will die out. But I think that at heart is what we're talking about here. Very controversial stuff, this, and it's the sort of stuff that people in the Labour, people in general, journalists in general, have wanted to shy away from through fear of being accused of being racist. But I think there are times when you actually have to be blunt about this, and you have to accept that the Awami League is not something that any British politician should be associating with.
Most definitely. Now, Michael, earlier this week, the Prime Minister failed to give his Chancellor a ringing endorsement before Number 10 belatedly backed Rachel Reeves. How do you see that relationship playing out?
Well, it's tricky. Rachel Reeves has, she's had a very difficult 6 months, or however it is now. It is about 6 months as Chancellor.
Yeah. Would you say it was a bad budget? Do you feel like the budget backfired? Because that's certainly my view.
Yeah, I think she had to raise taxes. The problem is that she boxed herself in. Labour boxed themselves in by adopting these new the fiscal rules, which were a modification of the sort of fiscal rules they had under Gordon Brown, but also these commitments about not raising national insurance, income tax, VAT. And it really restricted her scope for manoeuvre. And yet Labour knew that there were going to be terrible, the black hole thing. They knew all that was coming. They kept talking about it before they were elected. And now, of course, it's getting worse. And so I think that Rachel Reeves, she is in a very beleaguered position. We've seen chancellors like that before, with Alistair Darling under Gordon Brown, with Geoffrey Howe under Margaret Thatcher, with Dennis Healey under Wilson and Jim Callaghan. But I think that Rachel Reeves, it's far less obvious how Rachel Reeves gets us out of this problem than it was for people like Healey and Healey and Darling and Roy Jenkins in the 60s as well. I don't think she's quite of the caliber of some of the chancellors that Labour's had in the past. I mean, I'm not saying she's stupid. And I think it's appalling. What's the way she did Rachel from Accounts? This sort of it's sexist, frankly, and nasty. She is a clever woman, and got a good degree and has got a good CV, although perhaps not as good as she's made out. But I don't think that intellectually she's in the same league as Dennis Healey or Gordon Brown or Roy Jenkins, or going further back, Hugh Dalton under Attlee. So that's a problem too, and I think that's a general problem with the Starmer government, the lack of talent. And Starmer, I think, is aware of that and is trying to do something about it by fast tracking people into ministerial office much more quickly than normally you would expect. But in Rachel Reeves's case, it's tricky. They are so associated that it's one of those situations where if Starmer was to get rid of her, it would reflect really badly on him in that they were so close. But I just don't see how Labour get out of this situation. I don't see how they fulfil all their very laudable ambitions to build more houses and to sort out the health service and so on, and our prisons and goodness knows what. How do they create the growth? They're really struggling to work that out. Growth is threatened hugely by by Trump and it's threatened even by him talking about tariffs, let alone imposing tariffs, which we may see very shortly. I hope it's just a negotiating ploy on his part. And of course, the other consideration, which very rarely gets mentioned, is that because of very high levels of immigration, and only a tiny amount of this is accounted for by the boats, but the population of this country over the last 2 years has gone up huge, by about 2 million. And that means that if you talk about growth per head, we've had hardly any in the last 2 years. And if anything, it's going down per head. And that could well continue. And Labour is talking about how we need to get everybody's living standards up. But that's very difficult to see that happening, or at least happening on a scale where people notice. And that, of course, is likely to drive people into the hand. Well, it's already losing Labour lots of support. That support isn't really going to the Conservatives at the moment. It's going to Reform. So the situation is very. I think. Will Rachel Reeves be Labour's chance at the next election? I think there's probably the odds are slightly that she won't be, but I don't think she's imminently in danger. I think, but if come 3 or 4 years down the road, there hasn't been an appreciable improvement in the British economy, he may have to sacrifice so just to give the impression of changing things.
Absolutely. Well, it's clear that Labour are between a rock and a hard place because they have a progressive agenda. They want to invest in public services, which we can all get behind. We know the NHS are under pressure. We don't have enough cops. Schools could do with more resources. Plus, the public sector want pay rises. But none of that is possible without growth. And it looks like that October budget dented our growth prospects rather than enhanced them, especially, I would argue, that national insurance raid on employers. Michael Crick, an education as always. Please come back and see us soon. My thanks to TV news legend, Michael Crick. Well, I do hope you're enjoying this edition of the Mark Dolan Show. And we brought you the fantastic news that Princess Catherine is in remission in terms of her battle against cancer. But what about her father-in-law, King Charles, who still deals with the disease, but looks to be having a very busy 2025 already with major plans for the new year? Let's get more from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hey, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. That's right. I mean, King Charles, his doctors are said to be delighted at the progress he has made and what he's capable of doing. So you're absolutely right. 2025 is going to be, it looks like, a great year for the king.
Well, indeed. And he starts the year with a very important commemoration, and that's remembering Auschwitz, the appalling Nazi death camp.
Yeah, that will be on January 27th when he will travel to Poland for the 80th anniversary. And King Charles, who last visited the camp in 2020 when he was just the Prince of Wales, is going to join other representatives from 20 different countries. This is going to be a historic occasion, and it will likely devastatingly be the last event of its kind to be attended by Holocaust survivors. And King Charles will be the first British monarch to visit, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Internet, because I know you will. But I believe he's actually going to be the first British monarch to visit.
Well, that's a credit to him for doing that, as you say, perhaps the last occasion of that nature with remaining survivors. Meanwhile, despite the icy temperatures in the UK, the King and Queen Camilla attended church at Cratty Kirk near Balmoral at the weekend. So, both these couples have had health issues, but they are as active as ever.
You're absolutely right. What I love about King Charles is his faith, his curiosity in faith. He's always been open-minded and had an open heart and curious about other people. Well, he wanted to be the king of all faiths, and that got him in a little bit of trouble when he ascended to the throne. But I do love that curiosity and the respect he has for other faiths. But we are seeing him really investing in his own faith, and I firmly believe it's because of his illness. And, you have to have faith in an instance like this. So, yeah, of course, he's going to jump out of bed and head to church and hear the word and say a prayer or two. I'm not surprised that he has made it a priority to be there, and I love to see it.
Yes, I mean, he's never been extravagantly public about his faith, but is a man of deep faith nonetheless. There's a sort of private aspect to this man's belief in God, isn't there?
We believe so, it's understood that he has all sorts of books around his homes about the different faiths, and that he, will talk deeply to other people about what they believe, why they believe it, and the origin of it. He's a history nut. So I'm not surprised by the idea that he's curious about other people's faith. But we do understand that this incident, this issue with cancer, has made him more conscious of his faith. And I love Prince William, but I understand that he is less enthusiastic about faith. And that's the one place that I wish he would be more curious or more open to.
Yes, it might be a great comfort for him, given what he's been through in the last year or so. Do we know how Queen Camilla is doing? Because she's had health issues herself.
We believe she is recovering well. You're right. She had a cough. She did not feel well over the holiday, and it was a few weeks. So we were concerned that she wasn't shaking it off. But it does seem like she's feeling better. They are in Scotland, and they will likely be in Scotland for the rest of the month, except for King Charles, who we believe is going to go to Poland himself on January the 27th. So I think that she's just taking some downtime. Think about all of the additional responsibilities she had throughout 2024. She was go, go, go. And I don't know if she ever expected, even in the position as queen, to be as much of the face of the family as she became in 2024. But she wanted to do everything she could to support King Charles throughout the year, through his diagnosis, through his treatment. When you study his relationship with Diana versus Queen Camilla, you see that he liked the fact that Queen Camilla stepped back and allowed him to shine. She had no desire to be on the cover of papers. She really just wanted to be there to love and support him. And that's not a critique to Diana, but she was a superstar, and everybody wanted her picture, and everybody wanted to know what was going on in her life. So I don't believe that Camilla ever wanted to take on as much work as she did last year. I think she did it out of love for her husband and out of love for the monarchy and wanting to ensure the future of the monarchy. And I've been really impressed with how much we've seen of her, and the way that we get to know her through her causes, whether it be domestic violence or reading, encouraging people to read. She has a book club. She has a podcast. And I do think that perhaps all of that work took a toll on her, and she might have just been exhausted towards the end of the year. And so I do hope that they are enjoying themselves and that they can take their shoes off and just take a beat.
Yeah, take their shoes off is a very nice metaphor. Let's talk about California. You're speaking to us live from Hollywood. The wildfires in LA have been absolutely devastating. Have you been affected, Kinsey?
The last day that I was affected was Tuesday, when we had smoke in our home. And I couldn't sleep because of the bonfire smell. I was afraid it was getting closer. How do you turn your lights out and just roll over when you can smell the fire? So that was the last night. But all I lost was sleep, thank God. I spent all last weekend collecting supplies, whether it be diapers, dog food, blankets, clothing, new with tags clothing, because we've been trying to get that up north to the Pacific Palisades. But there are multiple fires. Some of them have been put out, but we still have the Pacific Palisades fire, the Hearst, over 200,000 people evacuated at one point or another. I believe it was 10,000 structures destroyed. It's been devastating, and it's just been really defeating also, because you hurt for the people. I don't care how much money they have. Yeah. When everything's burned to the ground and everything you worked really hard for, you hurt for the people that have lost things. So I'm grateful that all I had was some yucky smoke in my house. I'm grateful that I was able to contribute in any way to help out. It's just been a pretty tough time because you want answers. You want to know what happened. We do believe some of this is arson, which is terrifying. And you just want how do you start to pick up the pieces after that? That's an even more overwhelming thought. Where do we begin once everything is settled?
Indeed. And even if you're wealthy, if you lost your home and you didn't have fire insurance, which many didn't prior to what happened, then you do have a problem. Governor Gavin Newsom has faced criticism. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, last year he cut over $100 million in our wildfire prevention programs. That's absolutely
$100 million, and that is loose change for California, which is the richest state in America. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, in the areas that burned down, they pay the highest taxes. This is according to Fox News, but Governor Gavin Newsom, it was the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Program funding for that, but he cut that by $100 million just months before these wildfires broke out. But we also have to look at Mayor Karen Bass, who initially tried to cut LA Fire Department. She tried to cut their budget by nearly $23 million in 2024, but settled for $17.6 million in cuts to our fire department. She also ordered an additional $49 million in cuts to the fire department's budget a week before the fires started. And there's a real push and pull between the fire department and Karen Bass in our local news. The fire chief will say, Karen Bass did this, and then Karen Bass will be like, no, I don't really think it negatively affected what actually unfolded. So it's interesting to watch these officials, including Newsom, point the finger at somebody else instead of somebody just saying, yeah, we made some serious mistakes and we're going to do everything in our power to prevent this from ever happening again.
Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex met with some of the locals impacted by these wildfires. Do you think they got it right in terms of their response?
Well, you've seen this. I know you've seen this trending. Family Ties star Justine Bateman tweeting that Harry and Meghan are ambulance chasers, calling it a photo op. She said they don't live here. They are tourists, disaster tourists. And it makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, I did plenty in my neighborhood without cameras, without documenting it on social media, where I was not in the midst of the chaos. I did plenty to contribute. I don't understand why Harry and Meghan had to drive nearly 200 miles to contribute when Montecito, I can guarantee you, had clothing drives, food drives. We're collecting things for baby to baby. Maybe I'm cynical for thinking that they drove nearly 200 miles to find the one place where there was a camera crew. Why is the mayor of Pasadena giving you an on-foot tour of the ash? Are those resources not spent better somewhere else? We know how hyper paranoid Prince Harry is about security, yet you will take your entourage nearly 200 miles round trip away from your home to be in the middle of ground zero, in the middle of a space that's already exhausted. I feel like, and there was that German documentary that said Harry and Meghan didn't really contribute to the community, that coming from their Montecito neighbors. I just feel like their actions, they would have done more, I feel, for the situation in Montecito. It feels like the fact that they were capable of finding cameras to capture it. Was there an ulterior motive, especially with Meghan's show that was supposed to come out tomorrow? We now know that it's been pushed to March the 4th. But there are a lot of people that are questioning what their ultimate objective was with it. They're not royals, you know, perhaps it's something Catherine and William would have done. Yes, they're royals. That's their job. America doesn't have royalty. Why is our mayor, or the mayor of Pasadena, why is the mayor of Pasadena giving them a foot tour for 47 minutes of the destruction? To me, it's a waste of resources.
Although they are public figures, are Harry and Meghan not damned if they do and damned if they don't? That if they hadn't appeared and were caught on camera reaching out to people affected, looking at the ruins, then it would be like, where are Harry and Meghan missing in action? Isn't that not the risk?
You're right, but I've come to expect it. I was one of the people that spoke out on March the 1st. I lived in New Orleans. I'm one of the people that spoke out on March the 1st because I could not believe that Meghan would launch her Instagram account and post a video frolicking on the beach, writing 2025 in the sand for the 13th time, when we just lost almost 20 people to a New Orleans terror attack. Hours after a terror attack, Meghan launched her Instagram account, and then hours after that, we had the attack in Vegas, where he blew up the Cybertruck. It was not the time. And then 48 hours within all of that happening, Meghan launches the trailer for her Netflix series. So to me, I expect them. I'm at a place now where I expect it to be all about them. I'm more surprised when they do show up, and then I question the authenticity of the visit because of what I've seen from them over the last almost 5 years.
Indeed, their opportunist behaviour has naturally made everyone cynical, and that is a problem of their own making. I couldn't agree with you more. Before you go, Kinsey, Donald Trump's inauguration just days away. Is America ready?
Yeah, I mean, you're just on social media, you are seeing the countdown. I think America's ready. I think that we just are ready to start anew. We're exhausted, we're broke, and yeah, I think that, there are going to be a lot of people that criticize him throughout his presidency, but I think that people just are ready to start fresh and see. But you know what? I also take that back. There will be people that criticize him, but you're also seeing people like Mark Zuckerberg, who, notoriously killed the Hunter Biden laptop story. Seriously, he's visited Trump at Mar-a-Lago twice now. He's done a complete 180 when it comes to fact checking on Facebook and free speech. So some people are getting in line. And then there are other people that are mentally preparing to just dog this guy for the next 4 years.
What about the US talk show hosts, the likes of Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, who I think we can all agree suffer from a very bad case of Trump derangement syndrome? Have they altered their tone given the enormous popular mandate that Donald Trump now enjoys?
They haven't. And it gives them plenty of content. While they can complain all they want, that's their space. That's their, that's the money spot.
Meal ticket.
And yeah, exactly. That's going to give them plenty of clicks on YouTube, and it's going to get them plenty of laughs. So they're set for the next 4 years.
Of course they are. I understand that Harry and Meghan have intervened in regards to Mark Zuckerberg, because for those that aren't aware, Mark Zuckerberg did a video, didn't he, in which he addressed issues around censorship on Facebook. And he said, look, the fact checkers have proven to be politically biased, so we're going to get rid of them. We're going to move a lot of our operation down to Texas, where presumably the politics are somewhat different to California. But Harry and Meghan not happy with this new direction from Zuckerberg. What have they said or done?
Yeah, they've really lashed out. They released a statement saying, contrary to the company's talking points, allowing more abuse and normalizing hate speech serves to silence speech and expression, not foster it. They said in an already confusing and in many instances intentionally disruptive information environment, Meta has shown their words and commitments have very little meaning or integrity. As they announced these changes, undoubtedly responding to political wins wins, which a lot of people have said that's, shade at Donald Trump, responding to political wins. They once again abandon public safety in favor of profit, chaos, and control. Meta's decision, according to Harry and Meghan, will prioritize those using the platforms to spread hate, lies, and division at the expense of everyone else. They said, we urge Meta to reconsider and reinstate policies to protect all users. But Mark, I would say to that, wouldn't it be more meaningful for Meghan to delete her Instagram account, which is on the Meta platform?
Walk the walk.
Yeah, than just release a nasty statement challenging his latest decision.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's like the people that complain about X but continue to post on it. The irony is quite shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've seen Mark Zuckerberg embrace free speech. You've got corporations dropping their DEI policies, including McDonald's and others. Will we see more of the Trump effect in the months and years ahead, do you think?
I do. And I'm not saying that that some of these people are really discouraged by some of these things like DEI programs, but they are expensive. It's an easy way. It's an easy out is basically what I'm trying to say. So I do think, and Harry and Meghan, by the way, also complained in their statement about Facebook getting rid of the DEI stuff, not surprisingly. But I do think that we will see other people walk away from it because it's expensive and it's an additional layer that if you can get away from it and save a significant amount of money and you're trying to get back on your feet after a tough 4 years, they might take advantage of the opportunity.
Well, indeed, let me reassure you, Kinsey, that the Mark Dolan show will be diverse, but only based on merit, not box ticking. And that is why you are one of the most important voices on the show. It's so brilliant that we're working together again. I've missed you hugely. Let me tell you, my viewers and listeners have missed you hugely as well. I've had so many emails and people saying, I like your show. My favorite person on the show is Kinsey. When are you going to work together again? And here we are.
Here we are. It was meant to be. No, you're my favorite person in the world. For the record, Mark Dolan, my favorite person.
There you go. I'll clip that. And that's a meme forever, even when you're cross with me. Listen, Kinsey, we'll catch up soon. Check out Kinsey's excellent website, todiefordaily.com, and her marvelous podcast of the same name. Kinsey, see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching the show. Brilliant to have your company as always. I'm really excited about tomorrow because I've got the top economist Julian Jessup who'll be asking a couple of simple questions. How broke is Britain? And also, has Brexit been the disaster that everyone claims it has? We'll be dropping a few truth bombs there. Plus, very excited about this, I've got a guest from Germany. We'll be talking about the AfD party. They're sometimes characterized as far right. So are Germany's AfD party dangerous extremists or common sense patriots? We'll try to get to the truth on that one. And what is going to be the subject of my hot take monologue? Who knows? Because that is down to the news agenda. See you tomorrow. Can't wait.